How many of you understood all 3 scripture readings in the languages? All 3. There's got to be a couple here, right? Probably some Koreans married to some Chinese people or vice versa. Nobody? All right. I got the 2. I didn't quite understand the Korean. And just before I begin, my apologies to Alex Biema, formerly of the Vancouver Canucks. I spoke about him last week. I heard he got placed on waivers. You know, when my kids were younger, every night we would, my wife and I would share a reading from Scripture with them. Usually the Scripture passage I shared was the one that I was working on for the week, the sermon. And some years ago, I was preparing to preach on the same passage. And when I was reading the Bible text with them, and it got to the part where if you have enough faith to say to a mulberry tree, be uprooted and planted in the sea, that it would obey you, my kids were unusually attentive. And I can't remember which one it was, but one of them asked me, "Hey Dad, have you ever made a tree jump into the ocean?" Of course I had to admit that, no, I've never made a tree jump into the ocean. Well, why not? They asked me. I said, well, maybe you shouldn't take everything so literally. Jesus most often used parables. And parables are a form of narrative, but they're fictitious, right? They're fiction. They're not narratives that are based on something that happened yesterday. They're stories that Jesus tells, often used as an analogy to get his point across. But Jesus also used hyperbole to get his message through to people. It doesn't mean Jesus lied. It just means that he would push a point to an extreme so that people would understand his position, right? His intention. So when Jesus says things like, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out, or if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off, either we all be walking around without hands and blind as a bat, or we understand that Jesus is using hyperbole to impress upon us the seriousness of sin, right? I've said this before, but a key point of biblical interpretation is that text without context is merely a pretext. Text without context is merely a pretext. We often hear phrases such as, if you had faith as small as a mustard seed, you could make trees jump into oceans or move mountains. And what we're told is that, what the phrase means is that we need more faith, right? We need to increase our faith. And we're told that if we're not experiencing such spectacular manifestations of the Spirit, it's because we don't have enough faith. We need to increase our faith. If only we had more faith, we wouldn't be in such a financial hole. If only we had more faith, our relationships would work out. If only we had more faith, our health would improve and our sick loved ones would get better. You know, what if it's not a matter of having more faith? What if it's not a matter of having more faith? We need to look at the context, right? Just prior to our reading from Luke this morning, Jesus was telling his followers about the challenges of discipleship. And he was saying to them, when someone sins against you and they repent, you must forgive them, says Jesus. And even if they were to sin against you 7 times a day, if they're truly repentant, you got to truly forgive them. And in response to such a hard teaching, the disciples say to Jesus, Lord, increase our faith. Increase our faith. And it's then that Jesus says that if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could make trees jump into oceans. So really what Jesus is saying to his disciples is, listen, you don't need more faith. You're saying increase our faith. And Jesus is saying to them, you don't need more faith. You already have enough faith. All you need is actually faith as small as a mustard seed. All you need is the tiniest amount of faith to be able to accomplish feats of faithfulness, amazing feats of faithfulness. Don't tell me that you don't have enough faith. You have all the faith you need. What you don't need are the excuses. What you don't need are the reasons. What you don't need are all the justifications why you can't forgive a person as many times as needed. So really, this text isn't saying you need more faith. The text is saying, given the faith you already have, why are we so reluctant to use it? Why are we so hesitant to live as faithful disciples of Jesus? You know, there's a difference between the spectacular and the steadfast. Getting trees to jump into oceans is really about the spectacular. But having to forgive someone who constantly gets on our bad side, who continually disappoints us, who endlessly tests our patience, well, that's more about the steadfast, isn't it? That's about the steadfast. I wonder which one is truly harder, the spectacular or the steadfast. Speaking of mustard seeds, there's actually a ministry in Calgary called the Mustard Seed. And it started because of the steadfast faith of 4 men from First Baptist Church who took a chance on a young, troubled, drug-dealing teenager named Pat Nixon. Pat became homeless. His father basically said, you can either leave the house now or you can endure the beatings that I'm going to give you. And at 12 years of age, Pat decided to leave home. He found a welcoming community in drug dealers in the interior of BC who gave him work, gave him money, and gave him camaraderie. He was in an adult prison by the time he was 16 years old. But these 4 men, they took Pat under their care. They had him stay in their houses even though he stole from them, even though he abused their trust, even though he churned time and time again to crime. They finally got through to him and accepted Jesus as his Lord. And he began this coffee ministry in the church basement. And over time, that small coffee ministry became the Mustard Seed Ministry, which is a groundbreaking mission and ministry for the homeless, the hurting, and the hungry in Calgary, which has housed and fed over thousands and thousands of people over the years. It may seem spectacular now, but it started with a steadfast faith of 4 men who wouldn't let this young, troubled kid push them away. What's more important? What's more important for the kind of world God wants? The spectacular or the steadfast? If you've been to the Grand Canyon, you know how spectacular it looks. But the wonder of it all is that this massive sculpting of the earth was started by the Colorado River. In the last 17 million years, the flow of that river, cutting through the ground, has carved out what is the Grand Canyon. It's the work of steadfastness that sometimes results in spectacular. Jesus tells us, listen, you already have all the faith you need. You have the faith you need. You don't need to beat yourself up over the fact that you can't get trees to jump into oceans. I can't do it. I don't think Youngte can do it. Probably none of us have ever caused trees to jump into oceans. You don't need to feel guilty if, despite your faith, your loved one doesn't get better, even though you prayed with every ounce of strength you had. You don't need to feel bad that your relationships don't heal, despite your faithful efforts, or despite the fact that you know that God knows you need it, that unexpected checks full of money aren't suddenly appearing in the mail to wipe out your debt. It's not your lack of faith. It's not your lack of faith that's to blame. We have the faith we need. We have the faith we need. We need the courage to act in that faith. We need to be faithful, steadfast in our faithfulness. Now, it doesn't mean that if we're faithful, if we're steadfast, that we should automatically expect the spectacular. More often than not, truth is that the spectacular doesn't happen. More often than not, our beloved sick still die. Our fractured relationships don't always mend. Our financial black holes don't suddenly disappear. So then does our steadfast faith make a difference? And absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. When the disappointments and griefs of life don't change. Faith is not about blaming ourselves because we don't have enough faith, but finding our strength in the God who won't let us go, in the God who loves us so desperately. Faith is about getting off the floor and knowing that however high that hill is that lies in front of us, God will walk that hill with us. Faith is about holding on to the hope that things don't always remain the way things are. That because God is God, that light will shine in the darkness, that love will win out over hate, and life will prevail over death. One writer says that transitive verbs like to have faith or to believe must have an object, right? The verb to believe must have an object. So usually we don't say, I just believe, but really, I believe in someone. I believe in something. When Jesus says, if you have faith, there must be an object of that faith, right? There must be an object to that faith. We don't just have faith, we have faith in someone or something. Because it's the object of that faith which is key. Because God is the object of our faith, even as we are subjects of that faith. The tiniest act of faith in the unconditionally good God gives us amazing hope. Because God is the object of our faith. Even the smallest faith that we have gives us amazing hope. And don't get me wrong, spectacular is not outside of God's vocabulary. More often than not, it seems that God would prefer that if we discover something to be spectacular, it's because of a long and faithful lead-up of steadfastness. Jesus warns us, don't go around looking for compliments. Just do your job. Just do your job. If you follow baseball, you know that we're in the postseason. We're in the postseason. The baseball postseason these days begins with what they call the wild card play-in game. One game, winner take all, for the winner to get a chance to move on in the playoffs. Earlier this week, I watched a wild card game between the Milwaukee Brewers and the Washington Nationals. It's the bottom of the 8th inning, and the Brewers are winning 3-1. And Washington has struggled to score all game long. They've only got 6 outs left before the end of their season, and it would have been easy for every Washington player now that came up to bat to try to go for the spectacular, hit that home run, cut that deficit. The first batter that inning was barely hit by a pitch, just on the nub of the bat. It hit his hand. Well, because he was hit, he got to walk to first base, right? One player on. The next batter was a guy named Ryan Zimmerman. He had been with the Washington Nationals since that franchise began back in 2005. Used to be called the Montreal Expos, by the way. And he was no longer a day-to-day player at this point. He was a pinch hitter. He's 35 years old, which is pretty ancient by baseball standards. He wasn't in the starting lineup. He was a pinch hitter. It's one of the hardest jobs in all of baseball. Because you basically sit on the bench until your manager says, you, get up there and get a hit. No warm-up, you're not loose, you just get up there and you just try to get a hit from a guy who's throwing 95 or 100 miles an hour. Zimmerman got up there and he fouled off a bunch of pitches before the last pitch broke his back completely in half. But he got just enough of it so that the ball went over the infield for a bloop single. Okay? Runner on first, runner on second. The next batter was the team's best player, a guy named Anthony Rendon. Rendon hit 34 home runs this year. For those of you that don't follow baseball, that's a lot. Probably one of the MVP candidates. Now, with 2 players on, Rendon could have been swinging for the fences, right? I mean, this guy is their best player. He could have tried to get a home run and it would have been the hero. But then the count became full, 3 balls, 2 strikes. He knew that the pitcher would have to make a good pitch. So he could have just been waiting to swing, to hit that hero home run, that spectacular home run. Instead, he took the pitch. It was high, it was a ball, he got a walk. Bases loaded. I found out later that Anthony Rendon is a Christian. In an interview he had given earlier with the Major League Baseball Network, he said, I have my faith in God. I was told to be humble before Him. Don't boast about what you've done. Don't put credit in your own hands. You have to realize that He got you there. Just do your job, right? Just do your job. Rendon got a walk, bases loaded, the next batter got up, hit a simple single, and it got under the glove of the outfielder. The bases empty. The Washington Nationals suddenly led 4-3. They won the game. Right? Spectacular win, but built on the steadfast play of players just doing their job, just doing what they're supposed to do. Our job as disciples is to do our job, right? What is the reward for a life of faithfulness? The reward is that life of faithfulness, right? The reward is that life of faithfulness. Faithfulness is its own reward. There's a lot of wisdom in that saying. Faithfulness is its own reward. There's something very liberating about not having to worry about what others think of us all the time. Whether what we do is being seen by others or is being appropriately appreciated. It's got to be so tiring to constantly project a certain image, to exude a certain air about ourselves, so that others can see, look at how important you are, how faithful we've been. Wouldn't it be so much more liberating to be just faithful, without expectations? To put all of our energies into doing what's expected of us as disciples of Jesus, instead of trying to impress people. The reward for a life of faithfulness is that life of faithfulness. Faithfulness is its own reward. And that's not to say that we toil at a meaningless, thankless task. With every steadfast act of faithfulness, that small mustard seed grows and grows until one day becomes the largest of shrubs, offering shelter for many, many birds. On this World Communion Sunday, hearing the scriptures read in various languages reminds us that though our faith may be a small thing, friends, we are not alone. We are not alone. Our faith is not in ourselves, our faith is in God. And in God, the smallest amount of faith has amazing potential. Our faith is part of a global faith community. All around the world this morning, there are people whose prayer is that they might be faithful, steadfast servants of Jesus Christ. There is a wideness to steadfast faith. We are not alone. We are not alone. Jesus had a vision for what this world needs to look like. A vision of good news for the poor, a vision of release for the captives, recovery of sight for the blind, and freedom for the oppressed. The wideness of steadfast faith is knowing that we might not ever achieve the spectacular, but we are called to be steadfast in our faith, knowing that doing our job, just doing what we know we can be doing, not being paralyzed by the daunting nature of the difficulties that we face, that we're joining with billions of Christians all over the world, in every town and city in our country, joining with Christians in places like China or Korea, in Ghana, in Nigeria, South America, in the Philippines, and Indonesia, all over the world, that together we, in the wideness of our steadfast faith, can work in small ways because we believe that God is doing a big thing. God is doing a big thing. Renewing creation, preparing to unveil a kingdom that will be more spectacular than we can ever imagine. There's still work for us to do. There's still work for us to do to make Jesus' vision more and more of our reality. It won't necessarily happen through spectacular acts. More likely, it'll happen through many, many acts of steadfast faith. Many acts that don't necessarily get acknowledged, but each building on others till one day something spectacular. The kingdom of God, the reign of Christ, will be on earth as it is in heaven. So what is your part? What's your part? What's our part? Because God is the object of our faith is never too small. Because God is the object of our faith is never too small. Even the smallest amount of faith can do amazing things. We just need the courage, the conviction, the steadfastness to believe that our faith, even our small faith, can and will make a difference. For the task that still lies ahead, Jesus invites us this morning to this table, to know his love and his promise. An act of faithfulness, seemingly small act of faithfulness, the death of a regional preacher in the backwaters of the biggest empire that the world had ever seen. Just another crucifixion of just another rabble-rouser. That's at least what it would have appeared, eh? That's what would have appeared to people. But that seemingly small act of faithfulness, God spectacularly churned the world upside down. And in Jesus, love wins. Life reigns. Light shines. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of work left to do. But as faithful disciples that follow Jesus, we're invited to do our part. Do our job. Jesus invites us to come and share in him, the one who strengthens us, the one who encourages us, the one who feeds us and nourishes us for the journey that still lies ahead. So friends, come and share in God's faithfulness, God's steadfast faithfulness to us through Jesus Christ. Thanks be to God. Amen.